Welcome back to Sports Cards and a Cup of Joe. This is your host, Joe Davis, and it is great to be back with you today. And I had a different topic planned, but of course the breaking news about PSA, everyone's talking about. I literally thought I was going to have to buy a new phone yesterday because this one nearly exploded from all the texts and phone calls that I was receiving simultaneously. So let's dig into it. PSA has announced another price increase on their value bulk service for all cards valued up to $500. At GotBaseballCards.com, we had to raise our pricing, our cheapest price point pricing from $22 to $25. And they also announced some other levels were slowing down even more. So it was a double whammy of being told your cards are going to take longer to come back and we're going to charge you more for them. So the value bulk service went up and the regular service went up $5 a card. So many of the texts and the phone calls and the in-store conversations I had were many customers, clients voicing their frustration, upset with PSA, upset that they feel like they're having to pay more even though they're not receiving the service that they would like to receive. They're receiving slower turnaround, but yet now being told they've got to pay more. So I want to break this down as to why this happened, what's going on. Let's look at the bigger picture and everyone take a deep breath, because I know that announcement was incredibly costly for my company. We have thousands of cards in-house that were being processed because we receive thousands every week, and we got no grace period. PSA didn't say, well, those were in process, or we're going to let you get the old pricing. They didn't. We're still honoring it. We're honoring the old pricing to all of our clients because that was our advertised pricing. So if they had submitted them, even if they had not gone out to PSA yet, or if they were in transit to us already, we're going to honor that old pricing because it's the right thing to do. But it was a very costly day for me and our company. But I'm not focused on one day's news. I'm looking at what's going on in the industry. So I was curious as to just how much volume is PSA trying to handle. And then I'm going to discuss the economics of this, because every once in a while I get to use my minor that I got in economics back in college. Go Vikings, very college Vikings. But over the last 30 days, PSA, this is according to gemrate.com, over the last 30 days, PSA has graded 2,001,637 cards. That's a staggering amount of cards. But here's the bigger sign. The 30 days prior to that, they graded 1,552,600. That's a 28% increase over the trailing two 30-day periods. 28% increase. Now, remember, it wasn't that long ago that PSA announced that they basically had dramatically slowed down their turnaround times, that it's even taking several weeks even to get new shipments checked in. And I spoke to one of the leaders at PSA about this very topic back in November, and we had a very long discussion about pricing. And I asked him point blank, I said, are y'all about to go up on pricing? And he said, first of all, we've just announced how much slower our turnaround times are and what they're going to be going forward for the foreseeable future. And he said, after we make this, they had just made that announcement, and I guess it was in October, if I'm remembering correctly, but we spoke not long after that announcement had come out, and he said, we're going to see what happens. He said, because sometimes when you tell everyone, hey, things are going to slow down, then I should say the turnaround time is going to slow down, then that might slow down the submission volume, because submitters are like, oh, I really wanted to get stuff back quicker. And he literally said to me, he said, if that doesn't slow things down, and I said to him, I said, I get it. The only other objective, or I should say the only other method you have to try to balance how much you can handle is probably raising prices. And I wasn't recommending it. I just have seen it so many times because remember, I'm a collector. I'm a collector first. And, I am one of my company's largest clients. I submit a lot of my own cards, and my company submits a lot of cards. So as a collector, it's very painful. As a group submitter, it's painful to me because we have to provide bad news when we know that that is a turnoff to many submitters. They're like, hey, I really enjoyed submitting at this price, but a $3 price increase, that makes a big difference in the bottom line when I'm reselling slabs. So I go back to the conversation I had, and he shared with me that a price increase was a possibility if they could not balance the volume that was coming in, because, you know, submitters will often say to me, they just need to hire more people. I employ a lot of people, not nearly as many as PSA, but, I have learned over 35 years in the hobby, just hiring other individuals doesn't mean they can suddenly take over things the next day. And so just telling them, you just need to hire more graders. Well, I always say, do you really want a grader grading your cards who has very little experience? You don't, and I don't. And trust me, I have been frustrated with grades I've gotten back at times, and I'm like, surely this was an inexperienced grader because we submit a lot of cards, really large quantities, and sometimes I'll get an invoice that we've screened, and I'm thrilled with the grades, and I'm like, there's lots of 9s and 10s here. And then the next batch, it'll be lots of 8s and 9s instead of 9s and 10s. And I'm like, we screened these using the exact same standards that we always do, very strict standards. And I will see a difference between invoices, one to the other. And I'll think to myself, wow, someone who graded this one wasn't experienced enough to truly understand that. So again, that's my opinion on a given invoice here and there. And trust me, I've heard many of your opinions on the same topic. But the point is, yes, they need more help. Yes, they need more quantity of experienced graders. When your volume goes up 500,000 cards month over month, obviously there is a need for more help. And I know they're working on that. I know they're constantly ramping up, constantly looking for more quality graders. But it's not just the graders. You've got to have those who can input the orders. You've got to have those who can ship. You've got all the other layers in the process. And so I'm sharing with all of you, I'm as frustrated as you because I don't like paying more. I know you don't like paying more. But the state of the industry right now is I'm not going to say it's unlike anything I've ever seen because I've seen it, but as I've been sharing with some team members, the industry, grading, new products, a lot of different things in the industry are so hot right now. This is the strongest I've seen the industry probably in at least 5 years, 4 years at least. So because 2021, middle of 2020 during the pandemic, it was insane, and it stayed incredibly hot through 2022. And this is the strongest I've seen it since that fever pitch we were at back then. Now, what happened back then, for a history lesson for those of you who didn't live through it, demand was so strong for grading back then. PSA steadily raised pricing, but they didn't match pricing relative to what they could handle. And finally, they had to raise the white flag and shut grading down. And they literally just stopped taking submissions. And I don't remember how long it was, but for months and months and months, they stopped taking entry-level submissions. Then they finally started taking like higher levels. But at one point, they were 18 months behind. Now, we get complaints now because it takes 4 months to get an order back. Can you imagine the kind of complaints we were getting back then when it was 18 months? They had a 13 million card backlog. Their goal is to never have that again. So when I talk about the economics of supply and demand, there is such an insane demand for PSA grading right now that it's like, you've heard the old analogy, it was like selling hotcakes. I just couldn't keep up with the demand. Right now, PSA grading are like hotcakes, I guess, at a breakfast where you got a lot of hungry men. I don't know, but they cannot keep up with demand right now for grading. So using the law of supply and demand, the demand outweighs the supply. The supply is how much they can get to right now. So raising pricing, though no one likes it, I don't like it, our submitters don't like it, resellers don't like it because that cuts into their bottom line. That is one strategy for PSA to try to balance what they can handle. In another way of looking at it is they're managing profitability with manageability. They're trying to balance the two. Yes, they raise pricing. What do they do with that price increase? Hopefully they take that and invest in more graders so that they can then improve the turnaround times. And I think part of it is if you were to tell clients, hey, we're going to have a $3 price increase, but your turnaround time is going to cut in half. I don't think you'd hear very few complaints about that. The challenge that they're trying to juggle right now is they've had to increase pricing while turnaround time has also been slowing down. So two negatives. So the hope is that if they maintain this price point, that they'll be able to speed up their turnaround times eventually, because time is money in this industry. And when it takes you 4 to 5 months to get your cards back, that means in many cases there are missed opportunities. A player who was hot, he's not hot by the time you get the cards back. I learned a painful lesson on that back when they slowed down to 18 months, because there were literally cards I sent in. I had multiple thousands of cards out there myself during that time period where it took 18 months to get them back. And there were literally batches of rookies I had sent in. I remember specifically rookies from 1920 Prism basketball, Kobe White, and others who were hot for a minute. And I sent in quantities of their rookies. And some of them, by the time the cards came back, they were out of the league. They weren't in demand. They came back and it was in their second season and they were now riding the bench instead of being this rookie that everyone was chasing. So, I lost a lot of money on a lot of players because it took so long to get the cards back. So there's no way for me to spin this really positively other than to tell you the industry is so incredibly strong. One of my largest submitters, I texted him as soon as I got the news. He submits over 1,000 cards every month. And he just said, not good, not good. And I'm like, I know. I had another submitter who was just furious. And he said, we need to, boycott, and I forgot all the words he used, but he was very upset. He's like, we need to teach them a lesson. And I'm like, my opinion, and many of you will disagree with me, my opinion is they're trying to balance what they can handle. And the other thing is we're living in a world where Collectors Holdings now owns PSA and SGC and BGS. So the only major player they don't own right now is CGC. And TAG is moving up on the radar, but TAG still doesn't process all cards. So CGC is the only direct competitor that offers the same level of grading as far as the types of cards, the scope, and that is a nationally recognized brand as one of the big four. So let's talk about what's going to happen with these other companies. Again, Collectors Holdings has made a price has raised the pricing of PSA. One of the first texts I got was, "What can I submit to BGS for?" And so I shared that. But I'm also well aware what happens. It is a domino effect because I've seen it happen so many times. When the major player, PSA, goes up in pricing, what will often happen is then everyone rushes to a competitor such as BGS or CGC or SGC. Even though Collectors Holdings owns 3 of those 4 brands, they are standalone entities as far as the grading's done at a different place. There are different graders that work on them and so forth. So there's different turnaround times with each company. There's different pricing with each company. And so what could happen, for instance, literally before we started filming, one of our largest submitters said, "I'm going to start sending all of my bulk stuff to BGS." And he grades a lot of TCG and Pokemon. And part of what happened in this announcement is PSA got rid of their special pricing for TCG. Now, I believe that was long overdue because, and I say this on behalf of my sports card submitters, because Pokemon and One Piece and other TCG, where there's so much volume being submitted and that has been submitted over the last year plus, what has happened is that volume has been the biggest reason for the slowdown. And PSA had still been offering the special discounted pricing. I know at GotBaseballCards here, we had been offering $19 a card for that service for up to $300 value, and now that's gone, and now that's all going to roll into the value bulk pricing, whether it be sports or trading card games or non-sports, up to $500 a card, and our lowest pricing is now going to be $25. So for those submitters, it was a massive price increase because they're going from $19 to $25. And when you're selling low dollar TCG, low dollar Pokemon, that can be the difference in profit or loss. So this one submitter I'm referring to, he said, "I'm going to start sending everything to BGS and maybe I'll get me some black labels." And because now BGS looks like a cheaper, they are a cheaper alternative for now. But what can happen, like I said, the domino effect, if everyone rushes to BGS or to CGC or wherever they might go, then they can't keep up. What's going to happen? You're probably going to see price increases there. So it seems odd for me to be releasing an episode where I say, "Hey, there's been a price increase. You should probably get your card submitted." But if you are looking for those alternatives, which we work with all of them, but if you're looking for those alternatives, I would say, and you're content with BGS or CGC or SGC, if it's modern, you're probably going to BGS or CGC, whereas SGC is a lot more recognized on the vintage side of the market. But as I told this submitter, don't wait, because he said he literally has hundreds of cards that he didn't turn in time to get the old pricing at PSA. And I said, well, don't snooze on this, because I would strongly, there's a strong possibility, in my opinion, based upon my decades of history in the grading side of the industry, that you will see other dominoes fall in the near future, meaning PSA raised their pricing, so a lot of people are going to start trying out CGC more or BGS more, whatever. Their volume's going to increase, and what might happen is you might see price increases there sooner rather than later. So if you feel like one of the other companies is a good alternative for you because of the price difference, I would recommend getting those cards in. Whether you're submitting with us or you're submitting on your own, I would highly recommend doing that now rather than waiting, because based upon the trends I'm seeing in the industry, I don't expect I don't expect a turnaround anytime soon. Because again, let's look at this. PSA announced how much slower their services were, how much longer it was even taking them to open packages. What happened in the last 30 days? They took in 500,000 cards more than they did in the previous 30 days. Now, I know the previous 30 days was the Christmas and holiday season, and I know that's part of it, but the bottom line is grading is not slowing down. It's a steamroller that just keeps going, and we see it here. The volume we're processing right now is insane. I mean, we have days here, especially on Saturdays, where there's at times we just have a line of submitters from the front door up to the retail counter, just a line of clients dropping off and picking up, dropping off and picking up. And so, this morning before I came to film, someone brought in 50 cards and he said, well, I didn't get them in time, but I'm going to go ahead and get them sent off. The other thing I have seen in the past, when there is a small price increase, I saw this around, I guess it was early 2020, PSA was starting to get this huge volume. I don't remember the exact month, but I remember they did a small price increase and our volume increased. And you're like, why in the world would volume increase when there's a price increase? Because the FOMO, the fear of the submitters missing out before it goes up again. And then it literally did go up again, because back then the demand was just so insane, and it's insane now. So you don't know what's going to happen. A $3 price increase, it hurts, but they didn't go up $8 to $10 a card on the base service. And I've seen that happen before. So I know it stinks. I'm frustrated myself. I'm frustrated for each of you. I love submitting cards. I love grading my own, and having to pay $3 more hurts. And I'm talking to the bulk submitters who do large volumes, because for our 20 plus cards, we had to go up from 22 to 25. One other thing I'll mention, screening now is more critical than ever. If you're not screening your cards, if you're not using a service, you're going to be submitting a lot of cards that shouldn't be submitted. Doug, our head of screening, head of grading here, he goes through thousands of cards per week that he examines one card at a time. He takes his time to help our submitters save money. We reject tens of thousands of cards every year that don't get submitted. And as you've heard me say, if you're just dropping those off at a store that doesn't offer that service, you run the risk of a lot of cards being submitted that should never be submitted in the first place. You run the risk of possibly grading counterfeits. If you go back a few episodes, you'll hear me talk about all the counterfeits hitting the market, everything from Mickey Mantle 52 Tops to brand new Pokemon cards. There's so many counterfeits out there, and we do our best to catch every one of those to save you from wasting money on submitting those. We hate it if you bought them thinking they were real, but we'll at least save you on the grading side. So keep that in mind. As the price goes up, the need for having cards examined also goes up. And we have not changed our cost on that. It's still $3 a card for pass-fail, $5 a card if you want detailed screening. And this episode is not a big sales pitch, but I wanted to share that, because when you do a big picture overview of grading in the industry, of course, PSA is the biggest player, and Collectors Holdings owns two other companies. But regardless of which company you're choosing to work with, having your cards screened can be a huge, huge savings for you. And it keeps you from getting back a lot of 7s and 8s on cards where you're not even going to get your money back on the grading. So keep that in mind as part of your overall strategies when it comes to grading. So I hope my next episode can be a little more uplifting. Sometimes when you deliver the news, you just got to deliver it plain and simple. And sadly, that's the news of the day. That's the news of the week, what everyone's going to be talking about, that PSA went up again, and what are they doing? And again, my opinion, it comes down to simple economics. I had no warning. They didn't let me know. I found out the same time the rest of the collecting world did when PSA sent out their announcement. And so it just shows how much demand there is. Again, over 2 million cards graded by PSA in the last 30 days. That shows there is incredible demand for their slabs. Demand that doesn't seem to be slowing down. Will a $3 price increase slow things down? Probably a little bit, but probably not a lot. So we're still here to help you with grading, whatever your needs are. So I appreciate you joining us for this episode. Remember today, most important thing I could share with you is that my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, He loves you. He wants a relationship with you, and He gave His life for you. And I think each of you are awesome. I'm thankful for each of you who are part of the collecting community. We've been here serving the hobby for 35 years, and we're here to help you as well. So I look forward to joining with you next time. Thanks so much, everyone.